do my obstacle course. Om Shanti, everyone. Welcome to Thursday evening's conversation. And hello, Zoomers. Thank you all for coming, for being here and sharing your very high vibrations with us of peace. Thank you. And Zoomers, thank you for joining us. I'm going to speak in my Brooklynese tonight really fast because we've got a really interesting, great topic tonight. We always do, but tonight it's going to be very full-bodied. But I have to make an announcement first, and you'll indulge me. I'm going to make the same announcement again at the end. We always, the Brahma Kumaris, are very focused on peace and nonviolence. Well, first of all, how many of you have been here before? How many of you is your first time? Wow. Well, welcome. We'll see you again. We focus on meditation, but also going back to our original state, which is peace and nonviolence. And we are going to be having on Saturday, October 5th. That's not this Saturday, it's the following Saturday, in recognition of the International Day of Nonviolence. And it usually, well, I want to say it centers around Mahatma Gandhi, but we are an NGO of the United Nations. There will be in this space exploring the space of peace. And it's going to be in person only. And it's kind of an open house from 1 to 4 p.m. here. It's going to be an art exhibit, instrumental music, reflective activities. There's going to be hourly insights and guided meditation. And the idea is that if enough people come, and it's going to be done through Brahma Kumari centers, and not just Brahma Kumari centers, most spiritual centers, during that time, the idea is the vibrations will lead to peace. And I just want to give a personal note. This week, I work in Manhattan. It's oftentimes why you see me running in here, because I'm coming from the city. And ironically, this week, I couldn't understand I think it was Tuesday, a lot of police presence. Well, because a lot was going on at the UN. Dignitaries, ambassadors from all over the world were converging on New York City. And you can imagine, the bottom line is it was a notion of working towards peace. And boy, I don't know how the UN is doing, but I know we need it. And if you saw what the city looked like, boy, do we need it. It was really quite something, just getting home and going through the streets because of the security. So it's really not to make light of what we do here. And that's the recognizing International Day of Nonviolence. And again, it's October 5th. It's between 1 and 4. There's a flyer outside. You can call up here. There's also, if you take a picture of a URL, but they would prefer if you could RSVP. But let's go to tonight. We are going to be focusing on aspects of awareness, which really is important. How aware are you? Who are you? I'm always asking myself, who am I? So I was thinking today the subject is creating ourselves. And if you follow the Judeo-Christian scriptures, they talk about and God created man on the 6th day. But really what we've learned is that we create ourselves too. And it's a lifelong process. And tonight, that subject is going to be met by a very, I want to say provocative thinker, but a very peaceful, provocative thinker. And that is Tony. Brother Tony's laughing, but it's true. And I got a glimpse of what he's going to talk about tonight, and it's really powerful. Let me just give you the self. But one of the hats that he wears, we're going to talk about hats. I hope you can hear me. I've got a lot of papers here, but we wear hats, different hats. I know even in my own job at work, I have a lot of hats, but Tony is an architect and a planner in New York City. He has worked as a government official and as a corporate manager, in addition to managing his own architecture practice. He has worked in Europe and Asia, and of course, this country. And I think you're even doing stuff for my employment. Am I right? For the New York State? I work in housing, so yes, my agency, and there's no, yes. But most important, he is a student of Raja Yoga meditation for over 20 years. But what he brings, what I like, is he brings his spirituality with an understanding of the world and his professional life. And you'll see that tonight. And as I said, we had a conversation before, and it's going to be really fun. So pay close attention tonight, because it's really, you're going to come away with some real jewels. And with that, Brother Tony.
Production like that, it's going to be downhill all the way now. Who's this guy you're talking about? Um, one of the things about awareness, of course, everybody has it supposedly, is that it is really the way we create the universe that we're in and that in ourselves. Because although we all think we're in the same universe, you talk to every single one of you, it's got a different description. It's not the same universe. The person next to you, even if you've known them for a long time, and you define what that universe is, you're going to find very surprising things, how that person perceives the universe. So what we're going to do is start first understanding what awareness is. When we're born, we basically experience the universe as a way of understanding. In that context, that universe is us, the crib, siblings, parents, pets, anything that's of incidence in your life. That's your universe. And when you're called, your name, that name refers to that universe that you're in. You don't really know it's your name. When they say Tony, or my childhood name, which I'm not going to repeat, if you're being very embarrassed, it's not you. It's this whole thing, this whole universe that you inhabit. Just quite small by our standards, but it's quite large if you're a child. And we're not aware we're separate entities. We don't know that mother and child and the sibling that are different things. They're all part of the same world. So what happens is slowly awareness sets in. And you begin to close the sphere until that sphere is this profile that you have. And that is the beginning of awareness. You begin to define yourselves as separate entities. But in the process, we do the most extraordinary thing in creation. At the age of 2, we invent language. So in reality, everybody here, everybody that's ever existed is a genius, because inventing language is the most extraordinary intellectual feat that's known to man. It's known to us. Now, this is not communication. There's communication between whales and between other primates and between birds and other kinds of species. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about language. It's a unique tool that we invent that is extremely critical in understanding ourselves and the world around us. So we invent language, and it's already shown scientifically that twins develop their own language. Siblings in remote situations develop their own language. Deaf-mute kids develop their own language, which they obviously can't learn from their parents unless their parents are also deaf-mute. There's a lot of evidence that shows that we invent language. think for some of us it's downhill after that, but that is a really extraordinary intellectual feat. And it's very important because is the basis of how we begin to define ourselves in the universe that we inhabit. It's really critical because language is not just our speech. Language is something that we keep reinventing at various stages in our lives. Keep coming up with new tools for negotiating the world that we live in. And so we use it to kind of understand. Actually, most of us are not that good in communication, even though we invent language, don't seem to know how to use it very well in many cases. So it basically is a tool for understanding. It's a tool for knowledge, for acquiring understanding, and for storing it. Because obviously we think in words and we think in context of languages. And that's how we create the contours of a personality, define the limits of our aspirations and ambitions, and organize our lives. These are the kind of tools we use to get to that point. Now, we really believe, some of us believe that our current evolution has to do with circumstances that are out of our control, parents, siblings, whatever. That they were the ones that were responsible, that the environment that you're in kind of nurture you that. But the reality is that we created ourselves. We created the person that we are. We had become extremely expert. We even invented special languages like psychology to justify what we are, why we are, and why it's not our fault. But I don't believe that's the case. This is who we are, and this is a bunch of choices that we made in our lives that really define what we have become. Now, we may not like it, what we've become. Maybe it's not what we want it to be, but it's a path that we have taken. One way or another, we have made some decisions that took us to that point. But it's still an incredible tool. It's as we grow, we learn new languages. I'm an architect, so I learned to learn the language of physics and math because that's the way we negotiate with the physical world. The emotional environment that we inhabit. So we need the language of feelings. These are all tools that we develop. And then through that process, we end up at a place where we feel we have defined ourselves as people. And that's called adulthood. Although, again, there's a lot of questions about whether we ever get to that point. Some people never do, obviously. But it's very critical because throughout our existence, creating language, using knowledge becomes critical. For example, the most famous example that we can use is Einstein. He had a notion of how the universe was structured, how it needed to be organized, how it was organized, not how it needed to be organized. He had to invent a language to communicate it to the rest of the world. That language was his theory of relativity and the mathematics and physics associated with it. And that's only one example. That's again, the notion of language, some sort of tool for understanding the universe in which we live in. So we invent ourselves throughout our lives. And then we reinvent ourselves. We enter relationships with hopes of redefining ourselves. And then we leave those relationships because we don't like definitions and parameters they created. But all this time we're redefining ourselves. Again, using the tools of languages that we have acquired throughout our lifetime. So what is it that we become? I mean, what all this effort, what do we become? What are the characteristics of ourselves as adult people? How do we define ourselves? Who we are, what kind of things do you think define ourselves? What kind of words or concepts define us as adult human beings? Trying to make this interactive because I don't want to talk.
And I I was a politician and I'm a
Yeah, that
mother.
kind of stuff.
You
But-
mean like that
Yeah.
type of,
So what kind of things we judge ourselves? That's very good.
Oh, we judge ourselves.
Okay, that's one of the things we do. We make judgments on ourselves.
Another way that I define myself is identifying myself with the.
We can't hear you.
Another way that I identify myself is identifying myself with the higher power. So I'm a child of the Most High God. I'm a daughter.
Okay, daughter. Anything else?
I think she's jumping ahead.
No, but this is fine.
It's good.
Anybody else has what is this is not a test, you know, what comes to your mind, whatever whatever you think defines you.
I'm a parent.
I mean, this gentleman said we judge, which I didn't even have that in my repertoire, but that's actually a very critical part of what we do. Any other just think of a word. What are you? Okay. We laugh. Anybody else? You know, in addition to ourselves, we judge others in addition to ourselves. So what else are we? Mother, daughter, parent. I'm an architect, engineers, friend. Okay, very important. A soul. I'm gonna get to that in a minute, but kind of here we jump in the gun. Anything else? This is interactive session. So all of these things are part of our creation of ourselves, part of how we define ourselves. The things that make us who we are right now. Sometimes we're not even clear how we became this. Okay? How did I end up here? I never wanted to be an accountant. How did I become an accountant? Well, I never wanted to go into politics. I never wanted to, there are all kinds of things that we end up doing. So, but irrespective of how you got there, you're there. You made some decisions. You didn't get plucked down from the ether and put in that position. A lot of things happen for you to get there. That's the process that we do to create ourselves. Sometimes we don't like what we have, or what we are, but it is what we are. And I think that's one of the issues that I think a big part of the psychological movement is that you can't work out a problem unless you define it, unless you know what it is. So if you don't like what you are, you have to say it. You have to kind of admit it. Don't like this, so then you do something for changing it. So we spent a lot of time getting there. Sometimes we don't really spend a lot of time judging why we're there, why we're going there. We just go. My father was an accountant. My mother was a teacher. So it's kind of things that we do. We invent all these languages by which we project ourselves. So then we get to the point where we're saying, okay, now I'm somewhere, I'm here. What about it? Like the Peggy Lee song is, maybe I'm dating myself. Is that all there is? Is that all there is? Do I have to keep dancing? Is that all there is? At this moment, we have to start thinking about where we are, or what we are versus what we want to be. And it's very difficult because all of these things are very subjective. There's no objective way of doing things like this. This is all very much from your own experience, your own emotions, your own feelings. But the most objective way is to say, I wanted to be this, I wanted to be this person or be this profession, and I'm this. Why? What's the point of that? Why did I get to that place? That's the only kind of objective process that we have to kind of determining what exactly is going on for us to be able to figure out what is happening with our lives and where we want to be. However, you're all here tonight, so it's clear that you're looking for some sort of understanding of yourselves that may not be easily found in any of the traditional contexts. That is really the kind of process we go through. We go through all these, right? Acquire all these tools. We acquire all these capacities. And at some point, after we have come to this far, we say, okay, what is it that I'm doing? What am I doing? Is this really what I want? Is it all I want? Or is there something beyond that? And that, we spend a good deal of our life defining ourselves. And then we need to go back and say, okay, is there something of all these languages we've invented, of all this incredible, complicated tools we've used, is there something in this awareness, this consciousness that we are, that is not been tapped, that's not been touched? That happens to us, some at an early age, some at a later age, but generally everybody comes around to that way of thinking. So then we start thinking, okay, we're not just a sack of meat and bones and blood and electronic impulses. There's something beyond that. So we begin to try to define what that is. And that is where we feel spirituality begins. When you start looking at yourselves beyond all these definitions that you have spent your whole life creating. And you have to say, okay, what is it that I am beyond this, beyond, well, for example, you're a mother, okay? Say you define yourself as a mother, a parent, right? What happens when your children don't call you, don't write to you, don't come see you? Are you still a parent? Is that a definition that still holds? When they were little and you were taking care of them, there was a dynamic there. Now they're grown up and they don't call, they don't come see you. So where's that definition go? What is it? What happens? Your parent definition begins to have a hole in it. I mean, you're still a parent, but parent has to be something interactive, something whole, something going on. And I don't know about the rest of you, but my children are grown and they don't call me, they call me occasionally. So if I tried to define myself as a parent, it'd be kind of in a very difficult situation right now. They have their own lives. So, and that's the same for all of the things that you define yourself. I'm an architect. At this point in my life, I'm saying, okay, I'm an architect. I do certain things, it has certain kind of incidents and impact on the world. But is that really all I am? Is being an architect. And for some people, for some architects, that is their definition. That's really what they are. They cannot define themselves beyond that. And they invest incredible levels of energy in doing that. In creative and they do sometimes extraordinary things, but they're things. It's not them. What you are is not things that you create. Unfortunately, the American mentality is what you create is what you are. Your job is what you are. Your children is what you are. Your wife is what you are. You know, all these things define you. That's why here we feel, well, let's take a break from all these definitions that you have ascribed to yourself over the years, or other people have ascribed to you. What you are is not the things that you do. What you are is not the offsprings you create. They're not yours anyway. They were never yours to begin with. They're just given to your care. And then after that, they're on their own. So even the most incredible act of creation, which is to having raising children, a very limited thing in many ways, because they have their own lives. So all of this stuff that we have now spent the whole life organizing and creating and structuring, it's got limitations. So then we have to look at the possibility of creating yet another language for ourselves, to understand ourselves in a different context. Context that doesn't depend on your product, your work product, where you look, what you do, but what you really are. And that is the language of spirituality. That is the language that hopefully we all are here to explore, to investigate, find out, because we don't believe spirituality is a state. Spirituality is an act. Spirituality has a language, has a qualities to it. Just like when you're 2 years old, you invent language, you invent this tool to be able to negotiate the world. Now at this point, you have to have a new language and create a tool. And that's the language of spirituality. Spirituality is not just a state. You don't say, okay, meditating, that's it, I'm spiritual. That's not the whole story. Spirituality is also an act. It's how do you take this consciousness, this awareness, how you take and create a language to have it, infuse it into your life and into the life of those around you. So let's talk about that. Some people here have been here before. So what do you think the language of spirituality is? Most people here have thought about this, but what do you think language of spirituality is?
Prayer.
Prayer. Anybody else? Peace. Love. Anything else?
I'm going to say silence.
Silence. Very good. Acceptance. Realizing that you're a transcendent person, that you're not exist in a limited world, right? Anything else? Happiness. Anybody else? Faith. Awareness and intentioning, an act, affirmative. Yourself. Something beyond yourself, something transcendent. Devotion. Freedom. Now, these are all appropriate responses. There's no real incorrect response to this, but there is something very important about spirituality that's different, because all of these things, love, understanding, acceptance, altruism, all these things we're talking about, they exist in the world. We've seen them, we experienced them, hopefully some of us. We know what, at least we know what they're about. But there is an aspect to them that makes them part of a spiritual language. There are qualities to it. So all of these things are appropriate terms, but what would make them spiritual? Can anybody kind of think for a minute? Just say what comes to your mind. This is not a
This is how I get my exercise every week.
what comes to your mind? What do all these things?
You can't touch them.
Very good. We're getting close. What else?
Transparent.
Transference. Okay. Okay. Internal.
Purity. Purity.
Purity. Anything else?
I'm going to say experiential. You experience
Experiential.
it.
Connection. Energy. These are all appropriate, but someone said something that was close to what I feel is really a critical thing for the language of spirituality. Very important term is unconditional. Okay? Unconditional love. Unconditional understanding. Unconditional acceptance. All of these qualities cannot have conditions on, cannot be associated with a specific quid pro quo, well, I'll do this if something else happens. The language of spirituality, what makes it unique, it's that it's unconditional. It does not correspond to any of the other languages that we've developed before. Because again, we create them. We create them. So we create language and then please our parents, we follow their rules. Okay, but we're the ones that invent language. Same thing with everything else. So this is the last creation that we have. The language of spirituality. And that language is unconditional. Anything that you do in a spiritual context cannot have conditions on it. The minute there's a condition, the minute there's a a context that limits it, it's no longer spiritual. It's no longer eternal. It's no longer transcendent. Unconditional. So as we, at this point in our lives, say, okay, we're going to keep dancing. We're not just going to say this is all there is. Okay. What is the tools that we take to begin to understand the universe yet again in a different context? And that's unconditional. Unconditional love. It's very difficult concept because most of the time we love people, but they do something to disappoint us and okay, not. Okay. Or someone we accept something and then we say that person, acceptance can't be conditioned. It's not acceptance. Understanding. You understand something. You understand the person. The person goes and does something else wrong. But you understood what was going on at that moment. And if you're unconditional understanding, then you always look to find out what's going on with the people that you deal with. And most importantly, how do you apply this to yourself? This unconditional quality. How do you love yourself unconditionally? How do you accept yourself unconditionally? Gentleman talked about judging. One of the things we learn very early in life comes with language, is to judge ourselves, judge others. At this point, we have to begin to say, okay, maybe judging people and judging ourselves is not really the most constructive thing we can do. We have to begin to look at things in terms that are not limited by what we want or what we don't want. One of the things I say, people are defined in two levels in terms of how they function in life. One of these cliche things that we all acquire at some point is that some people live their lives focused on what they want. People like that tend to be successful. They tend to focus all their energies on what they want. What they want may not be so great, but what they want, they go after it and they have a better chance of getting it. Some people, many people focus their lives on what they don't want, they don't want to do, what they don't want to experience. Now we all have a bit of both in us, or we all have a bit of both. We don't want to do some things, we want to do other things. People that live their lives exclusively on what you don't want to do are very unhappy, obviously, because all they look at, the whole energy is based on all the things that are negative in the world and in themselves. So all of that we have to let go of. Not what you want, not what you don't want. Is what is it that, how is it that you're going to now look at the world in a way that's not going to be judgmental? It's going to be rational, but it's not going to be limited by what you think it's supposed to be. That's really one of the special qualities that we need to begin to cultivate now. If we want to begin to look at spirituality, it's not just a question of saying, okay, I'm going to focus on myself as a transcendent being and focus on identifying myself as a soul. These are very good things to do, very important. But then what do you do about it? What do you do? What does that mean? I'm a soul, but the minute I run into my former wife, or I run into my brother who I had a fight with, all of a sudden the soul becomes kind of problematic, you know? So if I'm a soul, why is this person making me so uncomfortable or making me angry? So it's not just being conscious, spiritually aware, but having the tools in that spiritual consciousness to be able to negotiate your life going forward. To be, have, not be not judgmental and be pure of thought. That's a kind of a parallel. When you're not judgmental, your thoughts are pure. You approach everybody and say, okay, this person has have qualities that there was a psychologist who did a interviewed a whole bunch of men in death row in the jails. It's a very famous study. And when he talked to these people, not being judgmental, and these people committed some of them pretty heinous crimes. And as he talked to them and they began to feel comfortable sharing with him, it became clear that they all felt themselves to be better people than they were. That they were not these monsters, but there was something to them. There was internal quality to them that were a value, that had some sort of humanity in them. But they felt the circumstances of their life stripped them of that humanity. Spirituality has to have a language. There's an extraordinary example on the internet. I still have it on my phone, about this man who was working at a Home Depot or someplace like that, Costco or someplace like that. And there was a very disturbed individual who was not working with the right tools in his head, and ended up having an argument and pulled out a gun and shot him and almost killed him. And this guy, who was an immigrant, who was shot, was an immigrant, and he recovered. And of course, the guy who shot him went to jail, and he committed other crimes after that. So he ended up on death row also. And this immigrant ended up doing well in the country. What did he do? Get money, had a family. He went to find out why this guy shot him. He went to identify, the book is called The Real American. There was a TED talk also about that. He went to find out why this man shot him. And as he went, and he talked to the man, and he began to discuss, he would talk to the man's family. And as that dialogue evolved, the man that was shot developed an incredibly strong emotional bond to the guy who tried to kill him. And then he tried to help him get out of death row, paid for his lawyers. So this was a person that actually developed language, spirituality. It was an extraordinary act of someone who had suffered, but who prevailed in life and went back and said, why? And he found out. And in the end, he was devastated at the loss of the life of the man that tried to kill him. That's the language of spirituality. That's what we need to kind of evolve into. and leave behind all these other definitions that we have vested so much of our lives into. Because that's where we're going to find the things that we think we have missed along the way. Unless it's one word, you have to have a microphone.
I'm just curious, how do you implement it though? Like if someone does bad to me, how can I not like I can imagine not wanting to do bad to him, but wanting well for him. How do you practically implement?
Well, first, you have to, this man did well for himself. So he didn't, his suffering was temporary. He did well for himself. And the act of this other person was so extreme that he was like, why did this guy do this? He didn't even know who I was. I was a cashier at Costco. But that's an extreme example, an extraordinary example. But when someone hurts you, right? First of all, you have to move away, obviously, or else you're going to keep getting hurt. So there is a logical action to take. Then, as you step back, you have to determine several things. Okay, why did this person hurt me? Okay, first, and examine it without anger. It's very hard. This is very hard. It's not easy. That's why the language of spirituality is so important. Why did this person do this? Looking at it without anger. First, did I do something? Was I culpable in any way? And that's hard to do, especially when someone has hurt you. Okay. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. You know, you have to be very brutally objective about this. You can't just say, okay, you know, I didn't do anything. You have to look at it carefully. Second, you have to say, was there a circumstance that was going on with this other person that provoked the situation that may be independent of me? By this time, you're calming down a lot. Okay? By this time, you've begun to get over your anger and your frustration and your resentment. Okay, there's something happening here. So first, did I do anything? Second, did something happen to this person? Third, is the person crazy? Is the person not able to function in society? So after you go through those three things, by the end of this process, you're no longer angry, you're no longer upset. And if the person is someone that you know, you begin to figure out what to do about it. But you have to first step back and examine the incident with some objectivity, which is very hard to do, which is why the language of spirituality is very important. It's unconditional. If it's conditioned, you're not going to ever find out what happened. And this happens like between siblings and friends, you know? How could they do this to me? How could this person say this bad thing to me? That person may have said bad thing to you weeks ago or months ago. They have forgotten they said that to you, but you remember. So every time you remember, you hurt yourself. They hurt you once, and you go hurt yourself half a dozen times more, or maybe for the rest of your life. It's very important that you make that distinction. First of all, you can only let them hurt you once. They can't hurt you more than once. They hurt you more than once, then it's your fault. All right? Someone hurts you once, that's one thing. When you get hurt by the same thing more than one time, the other person is no longer part of it. You're carrying that with you. So how do you do it? You have to develop tools, the language of spirituality, to start examining your life in a context that's not exclusively based on situational dynamics. You know, this happened, that was not fair. I mean, justice is a really very difficult concept, because it has very so subjective. And it's basically the invention of the devil to make us think that we actually are rational human beings. Because the real qualities, spiritual qualities are love, understanding, acceptance, justice. These have no place in justice. Justice is retribution. Well, if you look at things in terms of justice, which is an invention of man to make up for the fact they no longer have these spiritual qualities, then you're going to be looking at what happens in the court system. And that's not a real pleasant thing. Yes, of course, but it's unconditional, but it has to be unconditional empathy. It has to be unconditional empathy. Compassion. So this is what we feel you need to look at. Not just, okay, I shouldn't say that. It's very important to consider yourself transcendent being, that you're a spirit, your soul, because that's where you begin to understand yourself. But it cannot just end there. Then you have to be like the sannyasis or the renunciates that go to the woods and never talk to anybody ever again. Because they already figured out that they're cool and they don't want to bother. They would be soiled by all these terrible people around. I don't believe anybody here is really pursuing that course of action. So you're going to be running into a lot of people for the rest of your lives. And these are the tools you need to develop to get to that point where you are able to kind of go forward without being set back constantly with all the things that are happening around you. And as you all probably are aware, they're getting worse, they're not getting better. Okay, so these tools are extremely important right now for you to develop, for you to promulgate in your life. I think we're almost through, no?
Anyone has any questions? I don't have any questions. I have to churn what you said. And that term unconditional was very important for me to look at things through that. I had other words, but really unconditional really tapped into it for me. And that's something that I'm going to churn on. Does anyone have any questions for Tony? Somehow I didn't think it would. You actually kind of went full circle. I think you did a terrific job. I was wondering if you can do a meditation maybe around this, a brief meditation that we can think about what Tony shared. I'm gonna, and condition, I have a circumstance I'm gonna use, so thank you for that. So if you don't mind, we can do a few minutes of meditation to ponder on that. And then don't go, two things. I have a couple of announcements, and please stay for your tolling and blessings. Thank you.
Yes. I can hear you. On meditation, why the eyes should be closed? Well, we don't promote closing your eyes in meditation, but many spiritual disciplines do that to avoid distractions. We think that actually, when you close your eyes, you get internal distractions, which can be more powerful than when you have them open. So we think your eyes should be sort of closed to kind of minimize the light and kind of help you settle down, but not close them completely. So you start imagining what's going to happen when you get home and what's going to happen when you meet this person, when you have to deal with another person. So. Well, I can't. Absolutely. Absolutely. Focus on the spirit. That's what a spirit looks like. It's a point of light. That's the point of spiritual meditation. Okay.
Really nice session. We started with the awareness part of it. And sometimes we feel we being lesser mortals, right? So we are aware. So I have a teenage daughter who can get on my nerves sometimes, right? And I'm aware that if I react, it doesn't help. It worsens the situation. How can we get this awareness to work for us? Like for the peace. I love her, 2 bits, right? But it's we have the awareness, just don't know how to get it. Is there anything?
Well, basically, the term that we use is detachment. In other words, you have to, because she's your daughter, it's very hard to be detached. But just keep in mind that she's not yours. She's not yours. She was, how old is your daughter?
30.
Wow, it's a tough age. I said, I do have a hard job there. 13 is really tough. 3
Oh,
oh,
1-3, 1-3, 1-3.
no, 13. No,
She's a teenager.
no, 13 is a tough, tough age. Detachment is gonna have to be detachment, very conscious detachment, because if you have an adolescent, you have to really you have to be very aware of her and what she's doing and what she wants to do. But detachment in that she is not necessarily an extension of you. So her behavior is her behavior. It's not a reflection of you, doesn't have anything to do with you. And if it does, then you need to make that separation.
And the unconditional, I think, comes again.
Huh?
And the unconditional comes again. Unconditional
And the
love.
unconditional, yeah, you have to say, okay, whatever she is, she is. And I love her unconditionally. She is whatever she is. I may not agree with it, but I love her. So it's
Keep coming. That's it. Keep coming. I always say that's it. It does work. It does. Thank you for that question.
that's a heavy lift, though. I'm not gonna minimize
Takes time.
that.
It's not gonna happen on one Thursday night.
All of
but
us
it
who've
does-
had
It can,
all of us who had children know that's a really tough age. So.
yes. Does.
Okay. Settle back in your mind. Pull yourself way back from the front of your mind. Back so you can actually see distance between yourself. Between your consciousness and your body. Pull way back. Gently but firmly. Then come into this detached consciousness. Invest all your energy and awareness and begin to see this entity, this point that you are. Looking in front, looking towards your body. know that there's nothing that can touch you. That you are at a remove from all those things. That engage you physically. They are now remote from you. Your awareness is not on them. Not on what you are or what others think or say you are. None of that matters. Now, step back. And you are in a place where you exist independent of all of those things, all the dynamic that you call your life. You exist apart from it. And in this experience, you shed one by one all those worries and concerns. Let them go back to the body. Jettison them from yourself, from your consciousness. So that it becomes clear, clean, crystalline even. No shadows. Just bright, brilliant, sparkling light. That you use to illuminate complex and demanding dynamic. It is your body. Hold yourself, that consciousness. Know this is place where you can always come to and discharge all of that energy. that envelops you. This is your special, unique place. And as you return, your body, keeping your awareness a bright, shining dot of light. Know that's where you actually live. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Brother Tony. Truly an insightful evening. It's a lot to think about. Thank you all for coming and sharing so much. And Zoomers, thank you. And Brother Eric, thank you for all you do. AV, and thank you to the Supreme Soul, Supreme Being. Without, we would not be here. Just to iterate, full of announcements next week. It's a new month. We're going to be having a panel discussion instead of a single person speaking, and that should be very insightful as well. Also want to let you know that a new class, a beginner's class in meditation, is starting in October. If you're interested, you can let me know. We can take your name. Also, you can call Harmony House. And lastly, just to remind you again, on October 5th, International Day of Peace, there will be an open house here in person between 1 and 4, and there'll be hourly meditations and instrumental music. It'll be a lovely space for you. And please stay, and we're going to give you your Toli and your blessing, and Om Shanti. Once again, thank you for sharing with us this evening.